Hi everyone, and welcome back to another video. You are watching the Student Pilot. Today we're going to be covering the PPL ground brief and what you can anticipate on your flight test. I already put out a video too actually, which was audio style, podcast style, but I've had a lot of people reach out and say that they want the video style, so I got you guys. I'm going to be looking at my iPad, reading out my notes because it is a bit more intensive and there's a lot to cover. So let's hop into this video. So how are you going to prepare for your flight test, for the ground portion specifically? Well, you're going to hear a lot about this something called flight test notes. Flight test notes is a book you can buy from your flight center. You can order it online. Pretty much it's going to be standard knowledge that you should have coming into the flight test. You can use it to create cue card decks and constantly update that cue card deck towards your CPL. Flight test notes, your instructor's probably going to have recommended that to you by this point, and I would highly recommend it because you can build on that basic foundation of knowledge. Next, we're going to look at the weather briefing. So on your flight test ground, the first thing that you're probably going to brief is what the weather is looking like and whether the flight test is a go or a no-go. And why do you think that? So I would personally work from a bigger to smaller picture. So whatever route that you have been given, draw it on your GFA and highlight that route. Show your examiner what systems exactly that you anticipate you would pass through on this flight test, whether that's a high or low pressure system, cold or warm fronts, and so forth. You should be able to actually decode all the symbols and the weather that is shown on your GFA. And if your examiner has any questions about a GFA in general, you should be able to answer that. From the GFA, work to the TAF, decode the TAF, and decode the METARs. And this should be any TAFs that is along the way, METAR that is on the way of your route, and let your examiner know as well. And my final tip is call FIC, the Flight Information Center, before you step in for your ground, for your flight test. FIC is going to be able to give you a very thorough briefing on your route. Let them know that's your flight test. They may pay extra special attention to the weather for you, and you should be diligent, taking notes and being able to say that back to your examiner, understanding everything that has been reported to you by FIC. So don't just mindlessly say random things, just make sure that you know what is being told to you, and that can also show that you are very thorough with the weather that you're anticipating for the route. Next is your VNC. So what you want to do with your VNC, of course, is mark it out. You're given a route, draw your route on your VNC. Simple as that. You want to make sure you're not forgetting your drift lines. You're not forgetting your 10 nautical mile markings, like these lines that you're going to make along your route. You want to identify any obstacles, maybe something that's on the way of your route within those drift lines as well. Want to mark any airports that are en route, any alternate aerodromes that may be of interest if you need to make an emergency landing for some reason. And you also want to pay attention to the glide distances, and of course you want to make sure you're paying attention to airspaces. We're talking about what kind of airspace is this random airport that you're passing by. Is that a class E or would that be a class G? And how do you know that? And what is the restricted airspace? Is that advisory? And where would you find the information if you need to contact the aerodrome operator? So you should be able to classify, tell your examiner the airspaces you're passing through. You should also be able to say the height of those airspaces. Let's say you decide you're gonna pass by this random airport, aerodrome, whatever, on the way, and you're gonna avoid it. You're gonna avoid that area in general. My examiner asked me, how do I know that I'm avoiding that area? Because there's no imaginary circle in the sky that tells us that we are avoiding it, right? We're safe, we're clear of the zone or the area. So you should be able to probably connect whatever your VFR cruising altitude is to what you're passing en route. Like, I am clear of the zone because this is what it says in the CFS, or this is what it says in the designated airspace handbook. And, make a point of that, show the examiner that you know. Most cases, the height of the aerodrome could very well just be on the VNC, so you don't even have to go digging for it, right? So that is one thing. Mark up your VNC and really pay attention to all the things en route. And When it comes to your VTA, if for some reason you are passing through a Toronto airspace, I would recommend you get the VTA. You look at the common area frequencies for what's on the VTA. It's on the reverse side of the VTA. If you haven't ever seen a VTA, probably borrow it or just buy one from your flight center. And on the reverse side, there's going to be frequencies you can look at, and you should likely be switching to, especially if you're going to be transiting through some of these practice areas where people are doing their air work and whatnot. You also want to just mark that up. I would suggest marking it up, but listen, if you're only going to be passing just slightly through the Toronto airspace, like if you pull up a VTA, you'll see it's a big area. I'm going to put it up here, but if you're just passing through a corner of the VTA, I wouldn't mark it up. But if your route actually takes you through the Toronto airspace where you need to refer to what class of airspace you're in the Toronto airspace and whatnot, get the VTA, right? That's my bit on that. Next is the CFS. So you might already be very familiar with the CFS for your home airport or aerodrome that you fly out of, but you need to consider looking at some other CFSs for the route that you've been assigned. So to decode a CFS, you can find several legends for symbols and stuff at the beginning of the CFS. It's in the first couple of pages, and you need to be able to say what kind of facilities are available. Washrooms, Wi-Fi, restaurants, hotels. The obstacle clearance circle, you need to know what that means on your CFS. Why is that relevant? Any procedures that are expected at this airport. If there's a right-hand circuit, if there's occasional parachutists or whatever that occurs at this aerodrome of interest, you gotta just be familiar with the procedures. You don't have to memorize it, but highlight what stands out to you. Any noise abatements that may stand at an airport. And on the CFS, you want to make sure you identify your go and your no-go points. So if you don't know what that is pretty much the point of the runway where you need to have achieved full power and rotation of your aircraft. So at this airport that you've never been to, you need to make an arbitrary point. You need to select an arbitrary point. That's for your own safety. If you don't achieve full power and rotation by that point, you need to abort takeoff, and that's for safety reasons. I think that's pretty self-explanatory though. And some other things on the CFS, of course, you can draw on the little mini graph they have of the runways, your joining procedures that could be anticipated, as well as make a little note for yourself if it's an ATF or an MF, and what does that mean in terms of the joining procedures. After you've briefed your weather and you've briefed your route, you're going to have to brief your documents and airworthiness. So this is pretty much all from the flight test notes. The book is very handy for this. A couple things I would point out is know the type of inspection calendar, inspection schedule your aircraft at your school follows. How often does it go in for inspection? Of course, what are those calendar items that need to be done yearly, biannually? Even when does the fire extinguisher have to get replaced? Kind of know all these sort of things. You should know how do snags work, what is a deferral, that sort of stuff. I don't think is actually covered in the flight test notes. I'm not 100% sure, and that's because I work at a flight center, so I kind of already know how these procedures work, but you should definitely know how snags and deferrals work. If you don't know, and let's say it's not on the flight test notes, I'm gonna go through it very briefly. So snags pretty much mean that your aircraft is no longer airworthy to fly. So let's say you're doing your walk around and you notice that the tire is flat. The tire is suddenly flat. It wasn't flat before, but it's very much flat. You're gonna tell your instructor is probably gonna tell your dispatcher, whoever works at the front desk, and they're gonna go ahead and ask you to write in a snag. You're gonna write in maybe right main wheel, tire, flat. And the moment you write that in, that means that aircraft is no longer airworthy until it has gone in for inspection or maintenance of some sort. If it was something like a light was burnt out and you were flying during the day, that means they would write it in, it's no longer airworthy, but they could defer it. You don't necessarily need your lights on during the day right? So you can defer that, and the aircraft is now restricted to day VFR only, not to fly at night. So deferrals must be given. It's going to be written into that logbook, and now the aircraft is now airworthy until the date that is specified to which the deferral is going to last for. If there's just a snag, that means the aircraft is not airworthy, the aircraft is grounded, you are not allowed to fly it. So even if you wrote something in by accident, it's not airworthy. So be careful, always ask questions when it comes to that. And finally, you should also know how the certificate of registration differs from the certificate of airworthiness, what invalidates it or totally nullifies it, and what is the difference between the operator versus the owner, and which one is on the certificate of registration. If you know the answer to that, comment down below. I actually think that the flight test notes book might have it wrong. Pretty sure it did because it was a whole discussion at my flight center before. Next is weight and balance. So your weight and balance scenario, your examiner might say that he's 250 pounds and you need to do a weight and balance scenario because they're also bringing 30 pounds of baggage on board. So you're gonna chart it all out, and you should be able to say what is the difference between the aft and the forward CFG, which way is aft and forward on your weight and balance charts. That is also very important, as well as any scenarios if you had to shift weight around. So if there was a case where you had too much of a forward CFG and you had no space, you know, it's a full plane, it's a 4-seater, you got people in the front, you got people in the seats, you got baggage in the back. What are you gonna do in order to mitigate that? So kind of, I guess, entertaining those scenarios would be really helpful to you, even making a note of that, because the last thing you want to do is be stumped while you are in the flight test. And finally, for your flight test, make sure you are preparing your takeoff and landing distances. So these distances can be calculated from the charts in your POH. Please double, triple check them. I always make the mistake of something with my line on whatever I just try to replicate. It's not straight, or it's not slanted, or it's supposed to be this way. I always make some sort of dumb error, and so I'm telling you guys, just read the notes, just follow along the lines, make sure everything makes sense. If it's a tailwind or a headwind, why would my line be this way or that way? You know, run it through with your instructor or your friend, because I feel like it's the most simplest part of your ground, and yet for some reason every single time without fail I just do something wrong. So don't be me, okay? And finally, I have some tips for you guys that I think would be really useful. Number one, prepare flight test binder or keep your iPad all prepped with good notes if you're curating your nav logs and your weight and balance on that. Highly, highly, highly recommend. It's helpful for you to fall back on it, especially when you get nervous. If you start stumbling on your words, things just look more organized, right? You want to make a really good impression on the examiner while you're on the ground so that they can see that you are a competent private pilot on your way to being a professional pilot, right? Second, I would also recommend that you color code things as you're writing them out. It shows the examiner that you are very organized, you are meticulous with what you are doing, and once again, it really feeds into that good impression you're making on the examiner. And finally, I also recommend that on your actual flight test, you should really try to compartmentalize every exercise that you are doing. If you messed up on something, just put it away, right? Just like put it away in the back of your brain and just move forward. Don't worry about that one thing you just messed up on, and the rest will figure out itself. So that concludes the tips that I have for you guys, as well as today's video. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope that this was a bit more engaging and really helped you guys, for those who are a bit more visual and want to see me in action or something. But as always, if you have any questions, comments, or pieces of advice that you want to leave for your fellow PPL pilots, please leave it down below. I'm sure it's going to help everyone out. For those who are preparing for your flight test, all the best. You got this. Make sure you ask your instructors and your friends questions. You know, go ahead, leave questions for me down below. I'm sure someone else is going to swoop in and answer, or I'll get to it myself, okay? But once again, thank Thank you for joining me, and you are watching the Student Pilot. I will see all of you next time. Bye!